All right, yeah.
Yeah, is that okay? Yeah,
Uh,
cool. So, okay, so yeah, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, you can get started with it, and I'll just say something.
Okay, cool. So, our speaker today is Meiraba Takhellambam, and he is a faculty member at at Manipur University. And Meiraba is going to talk about asymmetry in Meitei today. Meiraba specializes in prosodic phonology, and we haven't had a phonology talk in quite some time in Zoomdemic, so this is going to be fun. Meiraba, you can take over, and for everybody who has questions, you can put your questions in the chat box, and Meiraba will let us know when it's okay for him to take questions. And also, you can also raise your hands if you like. Yeah, so Meiraba, you can start.
Thank you, Yanchin, and thank you, Zoomdemic. I first of all, I would want to apologize. There was some COVID scare, so I could not move on with my initial plan of doing it on, I believe, which was what the previous Zoomdemic. So I apologize to everyone. But but we are back again. Yeah. So hello everyone. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about uh, asymmetry in Meitei. So, and which is generally what I will actually try to talk about is something that I've been working around with, and try to fit it to some theoretical background. And I believe everyone has a little bit of phonology and introduction to phonology, and I have tried to keep it as short and precise and for the MA student, keeping in mind for MA students, so that I do not complicate things. So, but the main thing that I'm going to talk about is something that which is of interest in the sense because it might have a theoretical implication on how Meitei phonology is being prescribed till now, and what the lexical and the post-lexical rules are actually pointing towards. So how how a diachronic change, which is a simple process of voicing, is pointing us to how it the system is changing. How Loon phonology has infiltrated and is becoming native phonology. Yeah. So this is the overview, and this is how I'm going to go. I'm going to give a basic theoretical background of what I'm talking about. I'm not going to go detail into the theoretical background, and I think anyone and everyone can pick up a book and go through it, any of the all the theoretical backgrounds. And if there's any issue, then they can write to me. I wouldn't be discussing any of the theoretical uh, backgrounding of it. So I'll just start with lexical phonology, a little bit of backgrounding. I'm just giving a very basic, simple one-liner, which says, so what is lexical phonology? Yeah, today's talk is basically going to be based on all the theoretical uh, theories that I'm actually going through here. So lexical phonology was basically proposed by Kipaski, and almost at the same time, Monen was also working on it. So it's basically a theory of organization of grammar of phonology. So, and one of its main claim is that the morphological rules and word level phonological rules are interspersed, that they can, so for example, a rule of word phonology, that is a lexical phonological rule, will, yeah, which applies exclusively to word, may also, when the morphological environment, the required environment is fulfilled, can apply. So the second one from which I'm going to derive a lot of the analysis of the problem is the metrical phonology. So metrical phonology is a brainchild of Lieberman. Yeah, Lieberman started at 75. Prince and Lieberman 77 had a major role to play into it. So metrical phonology is basically the study of the relative prominence of the rhythmic units of spoken languages. So it's a theory which studies the relative prominence. It studies how how two elements come together, then how does prominent play into part. So the metrical theory of stress is one of the main offshoot of metrical phonology. The next theory that I'm going to be focusing on is prosodic phonology. So prosodic phonology is basically a theory of phonological domain where phonological units are defined based on the mapping the mapping rule incorporating the information of various components of grammar, which are grouped hierarchically. So prosodic phonology basically divides a string segment into it starts from the mora, then you go to the syllable, then you go to the foot, then you go to the word, a phonological word, then you go to the phonological phrase, the intonational phrase, then the utterances. So, which is basically these a string is basically divided into different domains, different phonological domains. It so these phonological domains can be mostly derived from the syntactic uh, domain, but it might not have a one-to-one correlation with the syntactic or the morphological uh, domain. This is which is one of the most important thing that we will discuss when it comes to Metilon. Yeah, and yeah, so a part of it, one important thing which what we need to discuss right at the offset is the notion of a phonological word. The phonological. So when we look into prosodic structure or prosodic hierarchy, then phonological word is the first uh, domain which actually starts to interact with different components of grammar, right? Before we reach the phonological word, the the interaction of phonology and different aspects of grammar is much less. So, but with the moment we reach the phonological word, then we start interacting with the other components of grammar. Namely, here we can have morphology, syntax, and other parts, the domains of grammar. So I'll give a little brief background of the language. So Metalon has 21 segments, phonemes, 15 consonants, 6 vowels, right? And what is of importance to us is what we're going to do today is that we need to understand that what are the coda consonants which is possible in the language and what are the different onset. So of the 15 consonants, Metalon can have only a limited set of uh, nine nine segments which can actually occur at the coda position, which are the voiceless plosive series, the pertuka, the nasals m, the proximants w and y, and the lateral l. So and a little bit of little brief of the morphological type of morphological word we can see it in the screen here. So Metalon can basically have two types of uh, words looking at it. And I'm going to add a third layer to it by the end of the talk, where when we're actually going to discuss that one more process, how the word is being derived. Okay, so moving on. So, and this is the metrical theory analysis of Metalon stress of in derived words. So where it's less dominant, it's a quantity insensitive system, it's unbounded, and degenerate feet is allowed freely. The directionality is from left to right, and Metalon does not have extra metricality. I am not going to take much of time and try to explain all of this. This is just for a backgrounding for what is actually coming, so that we can have we'll see it on what we're mainly talking about today. Okay, here. So this is the main thing that we want to discuss. Uh, the plosive voicing in Meitei suffixation. So I think we can even have the D if we remember Lalit's talk, the TD. So we can actually see these, that we can see the data in front of here. So here I would actually want to stop for a little bit and see how many can actually provide a rule for this, a phonological rule for this. Angchen?
Yeah, you have a question for all of us?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can tell us what is the question you want us to form a phonological rule that explains data?
From this data.
Okay, so everybody can type it out in the chat box probably,
Yeah.
or raise your hands and explain it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay, cool.
So half a minute?
Yeah, all right.
Mm-hmm. Is that done?
I think we are done with half a minute, right? Yes. There we have 3 replies.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like me to read them out?
No, I can see that. I think it's on the chat, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll read them out anyway because then it will be recorded and someone who's just listening would know. So Gopal says stops are voiced intervocalically and post-nasally. He's asking, he's trying to confirm the same happens in Tamil. Nupur says voiceless stops get voiced if they are preceded by a nasal consonant or vowel. Krishna has given us the full rule, which is minus voice changes to plus voice in the environment of plus voice. And Vyom says minus voice changes to plus voice in the environment of sonorant. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think Vyom is going to get the cake right now.
Vyom, you get the cake.
So this is what is interesting. So it's basically, most of them are going towards the right direction, but so the rule that actually gives we can actually see is, go to the next slide. Yeah, this should actually be the rule. And what we're talking about was, so we're looking at the plosive voicing rule. So when you have a minus sonorant, minus voice, plosive, between 2 sonorants, it's so the first one's somebody who answered intravocalically. So it's not just intravocalically. When you have a nasal, which is a sonorant, right? So we don't need to have a recursive rule when sonorant can do the work. Okay, so here, so when we have a suffixation process like we just saw, these are basically all suffixation, then we find that the plosives are getting voiced. Okay, but then we just have to flip it, and the moment it becomes a prefix, it does not apply. So in Metilon,
Meiraba, can I interrupt for a second? There is a question. Aisha asks, isn't it a rule that requires reference to morpheme boundaries as well?
Actually, not necessary. So this is where where I'm actually coming into. So when we actually have the example that I was giving you for the voicing, the plosive voicing rule was just for the plosive, and this is just phonology where it does have some morphological element to it, which is what I'm going to allude to towards. Yeah, so, that's going to be the main problem of the talk. Asha, am I making it clear?
Yeah, okay. I just wanted, I thought you were going to trick us. So.
No. I'm not going to trick you. Rina, I think same. I'll come to this. Yeah. So when we have the prefixation process, so this is exactly where we're coming to when we said that when we have a prefixation process, then the system does not undergo any voicing. There's no voicing rule which you undergo any of that. So this leads us to actually change this rule. So because structurally we actually see that structurally you have to have that, right? We have intravocalic. Yeah, the environment here is basically intravocalic, but the application, the voicing rule does not apply here. Right. So now here is the main question: why does it apply in one? That's why I wanted to take out any morphological feature before, just to give it, to make it look like only a phonological problem. But now we have a phonological problem where we actually see that in some, when you have a prefixation, right, the rule doesn't apply. But when you have a suffixation process, then it actually the plosive voicing rule applies. So what is actually happening here? So my the prefixes are basically the e, ma, na, which are the person suffixes, right? E being the first person, I should have written it down more clearly. Ma, second person. Na is the third person, and the attributive So the attributive will be the case of the first example, where we see this, right? And this is the first person, the second person, the third person. Yeah. So now this is the problem that we have now. So how do we actually solve this? So I have a three-pronged approach from all of those, the three main theories that I was alluding to when we started this. So the first explanation that I'm going to give you is that metalon prefixes do not undergo a lexical rule of plosive voicing. Suffixation triggers a plosive voicing when the derived structure is met, and prefixation does not. Right. So it's a lexical rule, and lexical rules can you can have a lexical rule if you apply the notion of lexical phonology, and you can use this. But now the problem here is if I'm actually calling, is there any question or any queries on this one?
No queries right now. Nobody's asking.
So the first thing that I'm saying is that metalon prefixation does not undergo a lexical rule. So if you, but the major problem is if we look at lexical phonology, then it says that structure preservation. It talks about structure preservation. Then the rule we cannot call it. If we talk about structure preservation, then the voiceless should actually come out as the voiceless, and we cannot have this rule. Is there any question?
Yes, Shrikar has a question, Meiraba. I'll just read it out. He says, quick question, does stress have anything to do with the blocking with prefixation? The unchanged consonants were all stressed.
Exactly. So that's the second part of it. We're coming to it. Let's not move ahead. Yeah.
Meiraba, I have a question. Can you explain the third point once, prefixation blocks voice as assimilation even when the derived structure is satisfied. What exactly is a satisfaction of the derived structure?
So when you actually have, okay, I have to go back. So here, so when you have intravocalic, right? So in all these structures, right, the voiceless obstruent is intravocalically, right, present with that is preceded by a vowel and followed by a vowel, but it does not go through, the voicing.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. So this is one, one rule. So so then what I was actually talking about was that if I actually call this a lexical rule, then I have to give a phoneme status to the voice counterparts, which actually leads us to the question of how, yeah. So the is it a synchronic? Are we going to accept a synchronic explanation, or do we have to? Are we looking at a diachronic language change, and how this is a theoretical question that we can actually put, that is Metalon plosives undergoing change now, and it's actually becoming phonemes, or the voice counterparts which we were deriving as allophones in those conditions, are they actually becoming phonemes? That's one of the problem, and I believe that we can actually use that analogy, and it works perfectly fine.
Meiraba, we have one question.
Mm-hmm.
So Shrika's question will be answered later, right?
It's coming to that, yeah.
Okay, so Samarpriya has a question. He's asking, in polysyllabic words of the C in braces, we see again in braces structure that is no affixation, does Meitei allow the central C to be voiceless, or is that necessarily voiced?
Hold on. What was that? The structure, what was that? C what?
CVCVC, where the first and the last consonants are basically optional.
Okay,
You
so
can check the chat box too. Yeah.
should have mentioned that Metalon is basically underlyingly a monosyllabic language. So you have monosyllables. The structure allows polysyllables only when you have a derivation process. An underived, yeah, you cannot have polysyllabic underived words. I think that answers what was the question. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So moving on. So this is one thing where I was saying that the lexical phonology can actually explain what is actually happening. And the other one is the metrical condition. Like Shrika was actually going up to, was that, so
Meiraba, your screen, is it not, we can't see your screen anymore.
okay, what happened? I think, oh, I think I've been checked out, or no, okay, oh, sorry.
You can you share it once more? Is there, or do you have that option?
Yes.
Okay.
There? Are we back?
Yes, you're back.
Yeah. So, so the second explanation can be actually the metrical condition of the plosive voicing. Metalon can be represented thus. So the one that who was it was pointing out that is because of stress placement. Exactly. So when you actually see a suffixation process, the both the suffixes and the prefixes are not stress carrying, or they are not heavy syllables, or they are not heavy, they are not prominent positions. So the all the prominent when if you actually have an onset in the prominent position, then it does not undergo the voicing, right? If it's in a weak position like this, like the structure, the metrical condition that I'm showing on the screen right now, then only it undergoes the voicing. So this is what I wanted to say when Aisha was saying that, does it actually require any morphological input? If we actually look into this, if we're actually looking into the metrical condition, then we don't even need any of morphological or syntactic analysis for it, and the metrical condition itself is sufficient to actually give us the answer that a minus sonorant is voiced only in the on a non-prominent position. If it's in a prominent position, it does not undergo voicing.
Meiraba, Hima has one request and a question. Can you make the screen full?
Oh, sorry.
And her question is, could you explain that environment? I assume she's talking about the environment in this phonological rule which you have on screen.
So the metrical conditions, right? So the metrical condition over here is basically the syllable, the weak syllable, which is on. If a weak syllable is the onset, is the onset, then a voicing applies. The minus sonorant, the voiceless plosive gets voiced. If it's a strong position or a prominent position, like when we have a prefixation, when we actually have a prefixation, then those sites are actually metrically prominent positions. That's why metrically they do not undergo plosive voicing. Am I clear?
Yeah, Hima says she gets it. I guess that also answers Shrika's question. I hope. Yeah.
Okay, so these are this is the one condition that we have actually not thought about when we are actually looking into it. So the lexical phonology explanation hinges on the fact that if we actually look at into if we look at the language in a synchronic way, then we say that okay, we can have a lexical rule which says that prefixation or the voicing, plosive voicing is a lexical rule, and it doesn't necessarily, as we know that, yeah, lexical rules can have exceptions, and it doesn't need to actually undergo voicing. So, and the third plausible explanation, and the one, so I been hinging on this too, yeah. So this is the metrical explanation. So during prefixation, the voiceless plosives are in the metrically prominent position where thereby they do not undergo the plosive voicing phenomena. Yeah.
Meiraba, Lalit has a question. Lalit, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hi, it's Reena. Actually, hi. Meiraba, actually have a clarification question. So, according to you, what you're suggesting is that voicing assimilation fails to happen because the plosive is in a metrically stronger position, right?
Yes.
And this analysis will go along for an interaction which is between a root and a suffix. Is it correct, or is it am I missing out on something?
So that is exactly so. When you have the structural requirement being fulfilled, then it doesn't actually have to. So when you have the structural requirement being fulfilled, then you don't actually need to do any of it.
No. What is and may I ask what is the structural fulfillment requirement?
So you need like between two sonorants, right? That is what was the requirement, right? That was the lexical phonology requirement of it. That when we were actually looking at it in terms of segmental analysis. But if we actually look into it in terms of a metrical analysis, then we don't need to actually look into any of the structural requirement being this.
So that means you are not going to give an importance to the morphological information, right? Of it being whether the element is a root or a suffix. Is that is what you're suggesting, right?
Yeah, it does not. So that's what one. So that was the one way that we have been trying to analyze Metalon for so long, right?
Okay.
So then when you actually look into the exception, when you look into the exception, so for example, if you actually say that a suffixation process in a suffixation process,
Mhm.
the application of rule is there. But when you have a prefixation process, then there's no application of rule.
Okay, okay. Then I have a question. I have a follow-up question. It might deviate a little bit, but then how would you analyze the non-application of voicing assimilation in terms of nominal compounds when you have interaction between two roots?
Exactly. So that's
Huh.
where so that's a talk for another part of it. So when we actually look, when we
Mhm.
look, so at the initial, when I gave you the metrical structure or the metrical stress rule where for non-derived words,
Mhm.
alone actually does have a layer of compounds.
Mhm.
And if you actually look into compounding, it does not actually go. It's a level.
Exactly.
Compounding is
Yeah.
level. Compounding is a level 2, and it does not actually undergo. When you actually say it does not undergo voicing.
But then again, it's not the same for all compounds, right?
Uh,
Anyways, we can have the discussion later on, maybe. I won't eat up too much of your time, sorry.
it's all right. I'm finished with write this. I'm just gonna leave people with questions. That yeah,
Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, sure. Thank you.
this is how you can explain things. Yeah. So
Huh.
this is full explanation, and okay. So this so and the third explanation that I actually have was the domain of application of voice association in known compound is not isomorphic to the morphological word. If you actually look into the structure, the non-application structure, it's actually being applied to when the structure is a word. It's being attached to a word, right? So which is actually not going to, so the domain of application of the rule is that inside a word, it actually applies. But if you actually are doing it outside of the word, then it does not actually apply. This is where, yeah, the morphological domain and the prosodic domain or the prosodic phonological word domain is not isomorphic. So there's actually an asymmetry between fixation processes and a suffixation process in Metalon. That's what I want to say. And I think that's it. So these are some of the references. Yeah, thank you. I think I kept myself to half an hour.
Yes, you definitely did. Thank you so much, Meiraba, for that really, really interesting talk. If anybody has any questions, you can put it in the chat box now, and we can have a discussion. Yes, Krishna, you can come in on audio if you like, or you can type out your question. Okay, so she's typed it out. Given that minus voice changes to plus voice in non-prominent position, can we suggest that voicing is passively articulated in Meitei, at least in non-prominent position?
No. No. These are phonological features that we're discussing, and the thing that you're suggesting is a phonetic feature. So we should not try to intermingle, yeah, those two. So if we actually need to account a given account and look into it, a phonological process, a phonetic process, then we need more, yeah, observations and yeah, to point that we cannot just make claims if you're actually suggesting, yeah, phonetic claims.
Krishna says, okay. Any other questions? I guess people don't have questions then. Okay, we have, I mean, we're done on time, so maybe I will ask a question. Meiraba, where else do we see this in Metalon, the voicing in the environment of strong, it was a strong syllable, right? Like you mentioned?
So strong syllables would not undergo voicing. So
Sorry, in a weak syllable, sorry, in the environment of a weak syllable.
so what is actually interesting is that this is where I go back to this. Metalon has this structure. So when you have a suffixation process, so it's very, yeah. So when remember Lalit's D.
Yes.
So that is also a voicing process, which is actually a suffixation process, which at the end of the day, if you actually look at it in terms of yeah, uh, the metrical structure here. So methanol is less dominated. It does not change when there's a derivation going on. The stress shift does not happen. It's only when you have a compounding, when you have a root, then only that there is actually a shift in the stress. Am I making?
Okay. Which is why you said that the compounding is another talk altogether.
Compounding is another talk altogether. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Because compounding. So what happens in compounding is then the dominance changes to right. So so for example, in the same way, if you actually look into, there's one more process which is so this is actually a bit of what I've been working on. So if you actually look into one more process in Metalon of rhoticization. So if you actually have the rhoticization process, then rhoticization is a post-lexical phenomena. So wherein it applies throughout. So wherein the l will become a r, a lateral will become a trill or a tap. So for that, there's so the difference between the application and non-application can actually be sorted at the lexical phonology level itself. But to sort voicing, which has been yeah, a problem in Metalon for a very long time, I think this is the way to go about it. And if we actually consider the synchronic nature of the language where it is right now, then I think it is, yeah, Burr is not, the structure preservation rule also is being maintained. So it can become a lexical rule.
I believe Reena has a question. So she's asking, could you please explain a little more on the change of dominance within compounds?
So so when you actually have a compounding process, so which you can actually see. So in Metalon, you can have a noun, verb, right? So if we actually have, so for example, it's actually one more process that we actually can look into it is the verbal compounding, exocentric compounding that I've been looking into, or the directionals that we talk about, sathatpa, songtatpa, right? So when there is actually, uh, when you have the deaspiration process, right? So because of the OCP, what happens is the second element, or actually undergoes deaspiration, which can be explained by layman's law. So, but what actually happens is, because of deaspiration, it becomes a metrically weak position. That's where if there is a requirement, if the structural requirement is fulfilled again, if there is an intravocalic position, or when you have a sonorant position, then you'll see that even in those VV compounding, then it undergoes voicing. Reena, am I making any sense? Hello?
Yeah, sorry that I couldn't figure out Lalit's phone. And yes, yeah, you did make sense. So then the question, so you were referring to the so-called compound constructions within the verbal domain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now then, would this analysis also hold for the nominal compounds wherein you do see voicing assimilation taking place? For example, the construction of word like milk, which is called sangom, and it actually you have this process, seeing the process of de-aspiration also taking place, and then you can see that clearly see that the voicing assimilation also has taken place. And interestingly, the case of nasal place assimilation also have taken place.
So exactly. So that is where I was saying that. So when we actually look into those domains, so those positions are already prominent, are non-prominent. They have been weakened. They have because of morphological or other phonological process. There's a feeding rule which actually is making it possible. But if you actually look at other, sometimes it does not undergo.
And how would you analyze the
except
case wherein it doesn't undergo
Hmm?
the change?
uh,
What actually is blocking that change?
undergo.
Yeah, what actually is, you just mentioned that there are times wherein the processes fail to take place, right?
What is
So,
actually going on? What is going? Yeah, we need to
so
know what is actually going on in the compound itself, right? So that is why I said compound is altogether a different story, because metalon actually has a compound layer.
yeah, actually I was trying to understand the story from a phonological perspective. I do have a story, but I'll talk about it in my talk on on Sunday. But my analysis is just structural based. But I just wanted to understand it from a phonological perspective. That's why I asked. Thank you, anyways.
Meiraba Aisha has a question. She's asking, can you go back and discuss the historical change explanation you had mentioned earlier?
Okay. So yeah. So historically, it's known that metalon did not have voice plosives, right? The voice plosives entered the lexicon. Right. So now, what I'm with this process, which is actually where, if you actually look into in terms of a lexical phonology approach, then if I do claim it to be, and it is working perfectly fine, if I do look at it as a synchronic, as a synchronic aspect of the language, that the rather than being just it just being an allophonic process where how it has always been dealt as that per ber are phonemes, but it can actually be a free variation where it's being conditioned, but it's being metrically conditioned, right? And otherwise, so because ber has actually entered the lexicon, and it has become it has gained the status of a phoneme rather than being an allophone. That is where I was saying that the synchronic and dichronic approach can be made, because dichronically we know that there was no voice plosives, but synchronically right now in the language, if you actually look into it, there are voice plosives which are which can be phonemic. We can actually have a minimal pair, which we had which we tend to just keep out, saying that it's actually a lone case or lone phonology. But what I'm actually observing here and what I'm actually saying is that the lone phonology has actually become part of the native phonology. It's no more lone phonology. Aisha, is that fine?
Yeah, she says, okay. But Rina has a question. She's asking, but we don't have voiced plosives in the onset.
Bazaar, Dalan, it's there in the lexicon. It is there now. These are Dukan. These are terms that people are using it. So this is where we can actually see the phonology incorporating itself. So the notion of it being just given the allophonic status needs to change. That is what my argument is.
Rina says that those are borrowed.
Exactly. So because of loan phonology, then when we actually see processes being making incursion to the phonological processes, then we need to acknowledge the fact that it it's no more an allophonic process, or it's no more the ber is no more an allophone, but then it has actually reached the status of a phoneme.
Hi, can I add just one point then? So I do understand your argument of saying that they are borrowed words and it has been borrowed for a long time. But why is it that this voice plosives have systematically failed to intrude the inflectional domain then?
I don't get it.
In all the inflectional markers, we don't have any voice plosive element in the onset position unless it's a more like the phonological process have taken place.
Right, but if you actually look into it in terms of Yeah, that is true. That is true. That is a fact which is yeah, true. But a lot of it actually. So this is where we need to do a lot of perception tests and try to understand that are they do they actually perceive the voices counterparts or counterparts to be yeah a part of the system.
Okay,
Mm.
thank you.
Meiraba, we have 3 more questions now.
Mhm.
So the first one is by Samarpriya. So he says, so you're saying that this voicing is because of loans or something with voiced consonants?
Okay, so this was a process, an allophonic process that had happened, all right, over the course of time, and now a lot of because of contact with Indo-Aryan languages, a lot of borrowed words are there in the lexicon itself. So that is one thing that I'm actually proposing. That's actually proposing, and I'm claiming that because it's actually infiltrating to a level of phonology which is actually a lexical level, which is not, which is at the core, one of the core phonological processes. It's not one of the peripheral. So which actually affects the in the lexicon of the system, lexicon of Metilon itself. That is what I'm saying.
The second question is probably related. Krishna is asking, to rephrase my question, I wanted to ask, are voiced plosives phoneme?
So that is these are so that is the argument that I'm actually trying to posit, that the explanation that we have been giving for the voice plosives all this while has been that these are allophones and it is only part of the loan phonology. But what I'm saying with what I just answered right now was that the voicing has become a part of a core phonological process which actually works at the level of the lexicon itself, the mental lexicon, not just yeah the yeah at the level of the lexeme. So that is why I'm I am proposing that this is actually a phonemic process. It's attained a phonemic status.
Shrikar has the last question. I don't remember if there was an example like this, but are there obstruent codas that get voiced when the suffix begins with?
Suffix begins with a sonorant.
Yeah. Are there obstruent codas that get voiced when the suffix begins with a sonorant?
So I am sorry to tell you so. Then there is then what will undergo the change? What would be the structural yeah definition, and what will be the structural change? So you need to have that environment. So for example, in the last example, when you have the knee, the copula, but it does not have an obstruent, and because of the nature per se of metilon being uh, monosyllabic in nature, I don't think so.
Okay, quick clarification. So I was just wondering, so here you have the nasals that end house, right? So it's zoom. So I was just wondering if there are any obstruents in the coda position there.
Yeah, there are. So then it does not undergo the voicing rules that apply, right?
Okay, got it.
I did not put those examples because
Okay.
redundant, right? We're not considering those.
Dream, I think, had raised her hand.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so again a clarification question. So Damiraba, you're suggesting that voicing assimilation is a process which has been intrinsically confined to lexical items in Meithelon, right? Is that what, did I get it right?
No, it's becoming a part of. That's what I'm proposing.
It's becoming a part of it. So
So it was
that,
yeah.
okay,
Not
and sorry, yeah, please go ahead.
so that's why I was saying in terms of plosives. So when you actually look into it, it does not undergo it. As we have been talking about it, we have always analyzed the plosives, the voice plosive, as being allophones and not being phonemes, right? But what I'm saying is because of the yeah, if you look into the diachronic process, that how it actually entered the language, and now in the present day language, if you actually look at the synchronic language right now, then it does seem to have become a part of it seems to have become a lexicon.
And
Sorry.
And the lexical item that you have analyzed over here is the interaction between the root and the suffixes, right? The example that's visible on the slide.
Yes, root and the suffixes.
Okay. Now the question that I have is, what actually, how would you analyze a lexical item then? Because we do see this marker, which is clearly a genitive over here, and then a moot marker that is there, that wherein we do see voicing assimilation. Then this clearly shows that the items over here might be a little higher in the structure, right? Then that means what I'm trying to say is that what is a criteria to identify something as a lexical item and something as not? Because clearly Meitei being a very highly agglutinative language, what we see as a word, it's like a big structure altogether if we draw it in terms of syntactic trees. So how would you analyze it then?
Meiraba, we can't hear you.
Oh, we can't.
So what we
Yeah,
are
now we can.
that's what I'm proposing when we actually look at this, that it should be on the so the strength relationship that we are looking at is the onset of the syllable. So I'm sorry, I should have actually put it, so the domain should actually be the word, right? The strong position of the word.
Word in sense of prosodic word, or the
So it's going to be a prosodic word. It's not going to be a morphological word. So that's where I said that there's a mismatch between the phonological word and the morphological word in Meitei. That's
but
why
how would
this is the most starkest example that you can actually see when you actually have the non-application of the person, right? The first person, second person, it does not undergo. So that the domain being all these are, so all these.
what I'm trying to say is that you do see the process of voicing assimilation taking place between all the suffixes that comes after the root, right? Be it the level which is really high, a moot marker, an aspectual marker. So then are you still going to term this as lexical, like those elements to come under the lexical item?
Yeah,
Or
because of the cyclic nature of the lexicon, right? So you are each after each cycle, the lexical is it's continuing, right?
oh, okay.
So it's not just a so the phonology is applying after each cycle of the morphology. It does not stop. So phonology is not applied only after one cycle, right? So the notion of level ordering actually comes into it, right? So what are the type 1 suffixes, what are type 2 suffixes, and our type 1 processes and type 2 processes. So for example, compoundings are called type 2 processes, right?
And type 2 processes are what you analyze to be cases wherein you don't see voicing assimilation to take place, right? Is that what you're suggesting?
Okay.
Am I don't know what happened. Okay. Huh. Oh, hello?
Meiraba, are we audible?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Rina,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Huh. No. The question that I have is, you are now, according to you, you're analyzing type 1 suffixes to be the element wherein you do see voicing assimilation to take place, right? And type 2 to be the one wherein you don't see voicing assimilation.
Not necessarily. So
Okay.
what I'm actually trying to say is that instead of doing, when we actually look into, so I'm actually doing saying that also the feeding rule that we actually see in all these processes if if the structural requirement is met.
Oh, I
then
think we lost the voice and the audio again, no?
Hello.
Hello, Meiraba, your audio keeps getting lost, no? I
Okay.
think there's some issue with the network, maybe.
I think yeah, it's my microphone. My microphone's been giving me a little trouble.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
So what I'm actually trying to say is that so
Mhm.
we need to actually look into it. Said what? Even in so when we if you start looking into it in terms of level 1 suffixes or level 2 suffixes, we need to actually into the whole what kind of suffixes are level 1 and what kind of suffixes are level 2. So for example, if you actually so look into so I will go back again to de-aspiration. So and the application of de-aspiration and the non-application of it. Right? So if you de-aspiration does not apply if there is a word and a suffix, right? The keys do not go de-aspiration anywhere, right? So but if you have a different so if you have a one of the directionals that we actually think calling them satokani so then you see that the de-aspiration process applies, and which will actually becomes a morphological process, right? Which gives us an environment which is being derived morphologically, right? Because of the morphological process, then it becomes a site for where you can actually apply this rule or
Okay.
voicing rule.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? I guess. Okay, so I think we are done for the day. Meiraba, do you have anything more to add or?
No, thank you very much. I think I just wanted to. I've been trying to throw this out to the universe for a while, and yeah, that's been good.
Thank you so much for throwing it towards us. People are already saying thank you. Thank you for that talk. And everyone who is here today, our next talk is by Shreya Mehta, Chitkuli verb inflection on the 7th at 11 a.m. Please do come for that. If you want to access any of the other talks, you can go to www.flingjnu.com. There's a resources section which has all the Zoomdemic talks and the handouts. Thank you for coming today. And we're going to end the meeting now.